first and foremost, welcome everyone. My name is Munya Munyati. I'm originally from Harare, Zimbabwe, and I grew up in Tenafly, New Jersey. I'm also a United World College 2015 alumni, and also most importantly for this session, a Global Citizen Year alum from 2016. I was in Ecuador. And I am really, really excited to be moderating this chat with Amy Brooks, who is a very, very inspirational woman, the current president of team marketing and business operations, as well as the league's first ever chief innovation officer. Very excited for this chat. And before I officially introduce you, Amy, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping things. First is that Amy will be with us for about an hour. And then there is an opportunity for the audience to ask questions. Please use the Slido link, which is in the chat, and make sure that you attach your name to your question, or else you will not be able to ask it. If you do choose to ask a question, we will call on students directly to answer their questions. And when you are called, raise your hand and turn on your camera so that we can bring you onto the screen. As a reminder, we will try to get to as many questions as we can, but naturally we will probably not be able to get to all of them. So please just bear with us if we don't get to your question. And now one of the more exciting parts of these is the use of emojis in the chat, to let us know how you're feeling. So, let's say you're feeling excited, you could give us a thumbs up emoji. If you want to do that right now, you could give us a little thumbs up emoji. If something really resonates with you, you can throw out a little heart emoji. If there's something you want to celebrate, you could throw out a celebration emoji. Just feel free to, emote and react as you're feeling. It would also be great if everyone could add their location, the place you're joining from, to your display name, so that we sort of know where everyone is tuning in from. Gives us an idea of sort of how Global Citizen Year has become.
And whoever has a basketball emoji gets extra credit, right?
Yes. Oh, of course. And yeah, lastly, there's going to be a survey at the end for everyone to fill. And you'll also be able to thank Amy for taking the time to chat with us, because this really is truly an honor. Now, for anyone who's in the chat, or just anyone who may not know a little bit more about Global Citizen Year, just want to share a little bit of context. And Global Citizen Year is a nonprofit forging new educational path to the leaders our world needs now. I was lucky enough to be a fellow in 2016, and now I'm one of more of 1,000 alumni across the world. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, there were challenges to the original program. However, in line with the innovation and pushing new boundaries and charting new paths, Global Citizen Year created the Academy, which is the virtual program that operates around the same pillars of leadership as the fellowship program. This program provides students from 17 to 21 with an incredible leadership as a practice curriculum, with the opportunity to be in communities of students from over 50 different countries, mentors from all over the world and different backgrounds. And it is part of this Leadership in Action series that we're having this talk in, that I'm very excited to introduce Amy. Amy Brooks is as I mentioned earlier, president of Team Marketing and Business Operations and the first ever Chief Innovation Officer of the NBA. In her role as Chief Innovation Officer, she leads a global strategy and innovation group that develops and executes new ideas and initiatives, collaborates with NBA senior leadership on setting global strategic priorities, and delivers data insights to enable fan and business growth. Since the beginning of her career at the NBA in 2015, she's held a variety of roles that have advanced and grown all areas of the business. Her leadership helped the NBA set an all-time attendance and sellout records, and created new growth initiatives such as the league's groundbreaking jersey patch program, and especially one I'm very interested to talk to about later, the Basketball Africa League. Lastly, Amy received her MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and she also holds a bachelor degree from Stanford University, where she was actually also a member of the women's basketball team that won 3 conference championships and went to the NCAA Final Four. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amy.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, and what a fantastic organization to be involved with. I wish I could have been involved with such an organization when I was your age. So
awesome. Well, let's not keep the people waiting any longer. Let's get started. And I guess to kick off our chat, I actually want to do something a little different. A lot of the times when we're putting together these bios to introduce our speakers, we try to keep them as short as possible and include, really the important information from our perspective, at least from the outside. But I'm sure, as with everyone, there's certain parts of you in your journey that aren't covered in these short bios that are equally as important to who you are as a person and how you became the person you are today. So I'm wondering if you might have any additions to the introduction I just gave, or ways that you might expand on your journey and tell us about things that are important to you, but people may not always know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm joining from New York today, but I grew up in Sacramento, California, and I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad owned athletic shoe stores all over town. So I grew up, if you ever, when you want to race in how fast you can lace a shoe,
Oh,
I am your girl, because I grew up selling shoes in my dad's store. And a story I like to tell, because I get asked a lot about this, is, how did you get into basketball? And the Sacramento Kings moved to town from Kansas City when I was 11 years old. And my dad bought season tickets, and he bought 2 season tickets, which meant that my brother and I always got to fight over who got to go with him to the game. But a quick story, I won't tell the whole thing, but I had a class project to write a letter to a famous person in 6th grade. And I wrote a letter to one of the starters for the Kings. His name was Terry Tyler. And to my surprise, a couple weeks later, I opened the mailbox, and this is back, there's no email, there's none of this back then, right? He wrote me back, and he wrote me a 3-page handwritten letter. So what did I do? I went to my room and I wrote him right back. And we became pen pals. He encouraged
wow.
me to come to the game. I walked down to the court and waved to him, and he waved back to me. He invited me to his basketball camp in the summer. And
Wow.
it really did inspire me to want to play basketball more, to want to like the NBA. And the quick, I told this story in front of 1,500 of my NBA colleagues the other year, about 5 years ago. And I said, I'd like to thank someone today. And I flew Terry Tyler, who is now a juvenile corrections officer in New Mexico, to Las Vegas. He got a standing ovation in front of
Wow,
the
that is
commissioner
amazing.
and everyone. But it's like, I think, as many of you who play sports know, like, sports can inspire us in so many ways. And that's why it's such an honor and pleasure for me to work. I've worked at the NBA 17 years now.
That is amazing. And also, that's such a fitting story for you to share with us, because I think there's such an importance that I think we can take away from the impact that we can have on people. And sort of, especially, those of us who, especially like you, Amy, are now in positions where you can directly inspire the next generation. And so it's really awesome to hear that it's almost as if it's a chain of inspiration that keeps going and keeps going. And I guess in line with that, actually, most of the students at the Academy are about 17 to 21 years old. And so I guess you could say a lot of us or a lot of the people who are watching this are at the start of their journey. And so I guess in line with sort of understanding and being inspired by people who are sort of at places people want to eventually end up. I guess it would be nice to hear about, prior to working at the NBA, you were working at Sun Microsystems and then later Bain and Company. Could you help us paint sort of like an image of what your life was at this point? What was going through your mind? Did you
Yeah.
have aspirations for the NBA, for your current role? Where were you at?
I'm going to draw the thread a little bit further back too, because I would go to these Kings games and I would see the people with the lanyard around their neck, right, working. And I played basketball with someone who was the camera cord carrier for the television station that broadcast Kings games. And he told me he got paid $50 an hour to sit on the court and hold the cord for the cameraman. I thought this is going to be my job. This is the job that I want. But it of course took a while for me to figure out there are jobs in sports. I had no idea, so when I was age 17 to 21, I had you heard about my goals to play basketball. I lived in Northern California, and the Stanford women's basketball team had just won their first national championship in 1990. I went to camp. I wanted to play for this team so badly. The unfortunate part is I wasn't good enough to be recruited, but I ended up being a walk-on, and I averaged 1.8 points per game. That's right, 1.8 per game, for the defending national champion Stanford Cardinal. And I eventually got a scholarship to play there. Or sorry, I got a scholarship my senior year. So I was thrilled, and that was just a major goal that I accomplished. But I knew nothing about the working world. I knew nothing. I would work basketball camps, and I'd go back to work for my dad's shoe stores in the summer. And then I realized, wait, I'm out of school and I need a job. And I worked for a startup tech company. This is back in the 1990s .com boom. And I was fortunate enough to have a manager who really taught me like how to operate in the working world, how to organize, how to organize problems. I was a marketing associate. I was the 19th employee, so I was the backup receptionist when someone went to lunch. Like, no shame. I bought plants for the office. Like, you just have to do that. You have to do jobs. Like, you just have to earn your way, right? Everyone knows that. But then I managed to kind of see my way through. My startup was acquired by a larger tech company, Sun Microsystems, which was a high flyer back then. But I just found myself, I wanted to do something around sports. That was my whole life, and I was missing it. And it is a reason I went back to business school. So I wrote my application for Stanford Business School all about wanting to work in sports. And I thought it might be around inspiring people, around some of the lessons that you learn, right? When you're playing sports, which I'm sure you learn great lessons that are applicable in the working world. But then I graduated from business school, and I realized not everyone can work in sports marketing. Like, you need to be differentiated somehow. Even myself, I didn't have really good reason for why working in sports. And so I ended up at Bain, which is a management consulting firm, which was so fortuitous because it helped me differentiate along with my MBA around specifically analytics and marketing analytics. And it enabled me, and I can tell you the story if you're interested of how I got to the MBA, but it enabled me to separate myself and differentiate myself, because I interview people all the time, right? And I say, why do you want to work for the MBA? And the most common response is, I'm just a huge fan. And it's okay being a huge fan, but it really doesn't differentiate you for being a valuable employee of the MBA either, right?
Yeah.
But that's all going to my head on that time. I was just trying to learn. I didn't know. I really didn't know what I didn't know.
So it definitely sounds like you're doing a lot of gathering of skills and sort of acquiring the different, skill sets and knowledge from different places, which sort of combined into what you ended up doing at the MBA, which I'd love to hear the story of how you ended up, actually. I'm sure everyone in the chat would too.
Sure, so it's definitely a lot of luck. So I knew someone from business school who went to another business school and ran their sports management club. And I just got to know them because I ran the sports management club at Stanford. It was at Cal. And we would do some things together. A couple of years after we graduated, he said, you know what, I got a call from someone I used to work with at the MBA who's looking to hire smart people. And it's like, okay, like I don't know if I qualify but I'd love to have a conversation. And it was this woman, Heidi Uberoth, who of course I later went to work for, but I was just set up with a phone call with her. And one of my business school friends, I was so excited, right? I have a phone call with the president of the MBA. He saw how excited I was, and I lived in San Francisco at the time, and he said, why don't you go back and meet with her? And I said, what are you talking about? Like, he's like, you go to New York, like, why don't you go back and meet with her? And sure enough, a friend's engagement party was the weekend before I was supposed to meet with her. And I said, so I sent her a note. I said, you know what? I'm actually planning to be in town. Is it okay if we meet in person? And she wrote back and she was like, yeah, sure, come in. Absolutely. And so then I booked my flight, right? I went to my friend's engagement party. But what happened is she not only met with me for a half hour, but she set me up with meetings with 4 of her vice presidents.
Wow.
And including one of which is my current manager, who's the deputy commissioner of the NBA, Mark Tatum, and who I ended up going to work for back then. And I don't think I would have gotten this job if my friend hadn't pushed me and I hadn't said, let's go try it, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just different in person. And I feel fortunate that I was able to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's really awesome. It definitely sounds as though you had to take a bit of a leap of faith there, which I think is something that very much lines up with Global Citizen Year when I think about it, because, for a lot of students, whether it's going across the world or deciding to take the year off, and whatever your decision is with Global Citizen Year, a lot of the times it's a leap of faith. And
And
so
it
I think
usually
that's
works out really well, right? It's probably
exactly.
scary to do, but
Mhm.
it works out really well at the end.
Exactly. It's definitely, like, I think, at least speaking for myself, probably one of the biggest growing moments for in my life, because it's like, all right, I was comfortable here, but I've left that comfort zone, taken that leap of faith, and now I'm being rewarded for that. So I think that's a really awesome connection that I think everyone on this chat can sort of connect to. Um, and so I guess I'd love to talk a little bit more about, like, your current role and status at the NBA. Before, there are a couple of really good questions being thrown in the chat right now, so we'll get to those in a little bit. But before we get there, I just want to maybe talk a little bit more about you now. And so, yeah, it seems as though you entered the NBA as a director and seemingly climbed through the ranks and became the first ever chief innovation officer, which I'm sure must have been an honor for you. And you've also been credited by numerous outlets as one of the figures spearheading the continued evolution and development and incorporation of new technologies and expansion. The play-in was one of my favorites personally. But one of my favorite quotes actually from you was in an interview that I watched. You said that only 1% of our fans globally will ever come to a game. And I like this because I think it speaks to how important the NBA is, not just within the US, but outside of its borders. However, as many people know, it can be very difficult to, bring significant change to, established franchises and industries like the NBA. And I guess I'm curious as to what have been the sort of sources of courage and the motivations that have driven you past, pushing the boundaries and enacting the changes that you feel have been necessary in the NBA?
So it starts with leadership, and this probably won't surprise you. But we've had some of the most visionary leaders. Our former commissioner, David Stern, our current commissioner, Adam Silver, and I must note our ownership group. And not everyone knows this, but the NBA isn't really structured like a typical corporation where it's a CEO and offices around the world. Adam Silver, our commissioner, is essentially a CEO, but we report to the 30 teams of the NBA. So as such, the owners of our NBA teams are very influential and also incredible business people and visionaries themselves. And you think about the Steve Ballmers, ran Microsoft for so long, Mark Cuban, etc. So it starts with leadership, and everyone has recognized, starting with David Stern, our global opportunity. And he used to tell a story to us back in the 80s. It wasn't easy to distribute. Our games are distributed in 215 countries right now. Back in the 80s, this was harder. He used to pack a VHS tape in his luggage, fly it over to Europe, right? And hand it over. And our games would be on tape delay in Europe. He'd also bring a bunch of those Michael Jordan "Come Fly With Me" videotapes, right? You still hear, if you hear some stories of our European players who have played in the NBA, like they'll tell you they grew up watching Michael Jordan "Come Fly With Me" on VHS, right? That was distributed. So, I mean, some of our older European players. So, but this is where what it starts with is the vision, and the vision that anywhere you grew up in the world playing basketball, you want to aspire to play in the NBA. And that's what we've had, and that's what we have. And the fact that we have 25% of our players are from outside the US is incredible. And it's not just our bench players. These are people like Giannis Antetokounmpo. We have MVPs, Joel Embiid. I mean, it can go on and on and on. These are impactful players. So we have an opportunity not just to grow basketball. And of course, when I told my story of coming to the NBA, and I have to admit, I loved basketball, right? I just wanted to work in something I was passionate about. What I realized soon thereafter is the real platform opportunity to unite people and to bring people together through sport. I mean, you listen to Nelson Mandela, like those quotes about unifying through sport are true. And that is our purpose. And so it's been really rewarding and fulfilling for me being at the NBA to see these opportunities to unite people around the international game, around women's basketball. We're celebrating our 26th year of the WNBA this year. So that is just very personally rewarding to me. But again, I'll go back to your question. It starts with leadership and vision and wanting to do things new and differently, wanting to challenge the status quo. And that mindset just pervades the whole organization. And I do with my group, no matter how small your job is, think about how you can do it differently and better, right?
Yeah.
You want people like that who have that intellectual curiosity to learn. How can I, we had I'll tell one more quick story on this front. We do commissioners awards for innovation every year. And we reward employees who are innovating at the NBA, and we get lots of different applicants. One of our winners this year was in our facilities group. They devised a system for measuring temperature of the arena and the court. And you would say, why does temperature in the arena and the court matter at condensation? Well, it matters because we have to postpone games if something goes awry in a building and there's too much condensation. And these are small things, right? But like they thought about how can we make things better in my particular role. And those are the type of people we want to work with.
Awesome. I really like hearing that, because I think one thing that I've experienced, not even just through my own like lived experience, but through other people, is people have ideas and have these like, really brilliant things that they're thinking of. But I've also encountered a lot of people who are hesitant to share, because you never know, I think a lot of people have the fear that, pushing the boundaries too much is a little too radical or too shifting the culture. But I think what I'm hearing now is that, these are actually things that you should, garner and look to build on.
And you want to be part of an environment that encourages that at every level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And try to. And another quick example, there's rarely a call that I'm on. If a question about NFTs doesn't come up in the chat, I'll be surprised. But had an innovation campaign in 2018 where we asked all league and team employees to submit an idea about what new product or service the NBA should create. And the winning idea, actually all 5 of our finalists were from employees, director and below. So that's meaning people in their 20s and early 30s generally, right? And the winning idea was around a blockchain collectible business. Okay. And for us to explore that, and we cited this thing called CryptoKitties in 2000. And we said, what is this and why are people buying it? But we saw the opportunity there. And this idea, which was from one of the younger people in our organization, encouraged us to focus on, no one had heard of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, but we went to the company that created CryptoKitties. And we said, what can we do with you? And it turned out to be a business called NBA Top Shot, which is digital blockchain collectible highlights. And Moon, you may know it, but everyone else on this call may not know it. But this is generated in the last year and a half over $1 billion in gross transaction revenue, and created the number one property in terms of NFTs is basketball in the NBA. And so it's been an interesting learning experience. But the point is, it really came from a welcoming new ideas at every level.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really inspirational to hear. I actually want to now switch over to a couple of like the audience questions. There's a really awesome one that I want to ask, because as Juliana mentioned in her question, it is International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to all. And with you being not only a woman in a position, in a like leadership position in the NBA, but also in a new role entirely. Actually, let me ask Juliana to ask this. Well, why am I asking this question? Juliana, if you want to switch on your
Yeah, Juliana.
ask this question, go for it.
Happy International Women's Day, everybody. So my question was really just, with it being International Women's Day, what are some challenges you faced as a female leader, especially in an industry typically dominated by men, and how have you overcome them? I mean, I'm sure you can give countless examples, but anything that's really comes to mind for you.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And it's both personal and professional for me, because I have two daughters, 10 and 12. And all I want is for them to see the world and think that they can do anything, right? That's what any parent wants for their kids. And so you're very right. As a woman in sports, there's been more times than I can name where I'm the only woman in a room, right? Fortunately, and this goes back to the point I made around leadership, I work for an organization that puts diversity first. Our players are diverse. What our values are centered on is diversity and equality. And so I've always felt supported in that. And I feel like it's always a focus area for us to do better. And we still need to do better in so many ways, but we're proud of having, on the NBA side, 16 coaches of color. We're proud that we have, on the WNBA side, a women's league. And on the NBA side, Julian, this is one of the things that was different when I was growing up. I told you, I'm on the business side. I spend most of my time on the business side. I never had a role model, a female NBA coach or general manager. We now have women on the bench. We have women in the front office on the NBA side. And you just need to visualize yourself in a role. And it's helpful to see another woman doing that role. Becky Hammon was assistant coach for the Spurs, was just hired as the head coach for the Las Vegas Aces. It's a matter of time until we have a woman as a head coach in the NBA. And that's inspirational for women wanting to fill those roles. So I used to think that, I just need to blend in more as a woman. And that's not the approach. I need to be a representative and inspire other people to want to do my role, and also try to forge paths for other roles or other areas of our organization that women aren't necessarily in as much. And so it's, we all have a lot of work to do, but I think just the discussion and that we're always talking about it is certainly a very important step.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for setting an example for so many.
Thank you. Thank you. I love your background too, Northern Lights.
Thank you.
There's another audience question that I think would also be really awesome to have them ask. This is Lauren. If Lauren is around and wants to put on.
Hi.
Hi, Lauren.
Sorry for the echo. Yeah, so my question was around, you've been in the NBA for a while. How do you continue to, I guess, get inspiration or bring new insights to the role? And I'm just thinking, I guess, also back to my own situation. Now I've been in my job for the last 3.5 years. Like, what's kind of also the turning point in how you look at your role in perhaps a different light?
Yeah, I think one thing is how broad our business has generated a lot of motivation for me, because on one side, we're a real estate business, right? We have arenas. On one side, we're a ticketing and a concession business. We're a media business. As I just talked about, we're a global business. Digital media, there is always something new, and we are in the midst of it all the time, right? So we're one of the first corporations to adopt these social media platforms and put our highlights on them. And that was then. Now it's trying to understand the metaverse and Web3 and NFTs and how the NBA, because we're a premium content business. And as we think about this future world, we know that whatever it is in the future, like, people will want to engage with our players. They will want to see, I told my pen pal story earlier. Now we're in a world where our NBA teams and players have 1.6 billion social media followers globally. And most of those, 2/3 of those, are outside the US and Canada. So we have this opportunity to grow globally. So those are the types of things. There's always a new problem and opportunity to talk about. And that is what makes it fun and engaging. And because we feel like we're squarely in the midst of so many new things that are going on in the world, including world events, right? And how we can help impact that and make things better and more equal and all of those things. So I find a lot of inspiration in those areas.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
But how do you, I guess, continue to transform yourself and perhaps like your identity within the organization as you grow?
I think it's through different types of roles, and I have had different roles, and that adds more vigor and just makes things fresh. You know, I started off in our partnership group, so working with different sponsors of the NBA to create great and interesting marketing programs, right? Back then it was Wheaties and Toyota and Sony PlayStation and those type of companies. And I was a consultant to our teams, helping them grow their business, and I still do that. And then this chief innovation officer role that I've done for the last few years, you know, my job is trying to coordinate our organization and focus them around what are priorities. We can do lots of different things, right? There's sports betting, there's expansion in Africa and elsewhere. And so there's what comes with that is a personal energy, I guess. You're asking about refocusing. And sure, sometimes, I will not lie, COVID, extremely challenging business to be in. Live events and indoor live events, right? Very challenging to be in. And my role was around fan protocols in our building. That's hard, and it gets you down sometimes, right? But these other areas of growth for our business didn't stop during the last couple of years, and that really helped me find that inner strength to just persevere. Because nothing has been easy for anyone the last couple of years, right?
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Lauren. Amy, actually sort of keeping in line with some of the recent innovations of the NBA, I'd love to actually ask you whether there are any specific current new things that are working on, or new innovations at the NBA that you're particularly proud of, especially given maybe the difficulties of the past year, or I guess 3 years now, we're heading with the pandemic. But are there any things that, kind of you're very proud of because maybe they are inspirational to you, or they touch on something something you've always wanted to do? I think it would be interesting to hear some of your, desires from early on in your career or time at the NBA, how they've manifested and what they look like now.
Sure. I will talk about Munya, the Basketball Africa League, because I think I'm stealing your later question. I think that's special, and it's so. Let me take a step back and talk about that. It's in order for people to grow up wanting to play basketball in the NBA, it's helpful to have a step in between, right? We have 450 players in the NBA. Not every aspiring basketball superstar can play in the NBA. That's a fact, right? Of course. Having local leagues is inspirational. And so in Africa, what we've done, and this is the second year, and this last year we had no fans, right? We're just executing the first year of the Basketball Africa League, but we have tournaments in Senegal. We just had it this weekend in Egypt and in Rwanda. And we have, if you look at the genesis of this, we have President Obama, who is a backer of this league. We have Dikembe Mutombo, one of our incredible legends, who himself built a hospital in Africa, and that has served 800,000 patients. Like, we have over 50 players in the NBA who either are from Africa themselves, or at least one of their parents is from Africa. And we look at our opportunity not just about growing basketball in Africa, but about economic empowerment of the continent. And so this brings everything together, right? You're talking about basketball at its highest level, creating something new, having strategic partners like Barack Obama and others who have that mission to grow not just basketball, but to unify through basketball and to create these programs around economic empowerment as well. So this is, again, it's new, but this is exciting on a lot of levels because this is part of just the globalization of the game in a really important part of the world. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. As someone who's from Zimbabwe in Africa, in Southern Africa, I think that's really inspirational because I personally know how big the NBA is, and I think I remember the first time that we started getting rumblings of the NBA working in different parts of Africa, and we were all like, "This is our moment. This is our chance." It wasn't good enough for it, but we thought it was our chance. It was like inspirational, you know. All the kids were suddenly, you know, outside working a little harder because it was like, and NBA is coming to Africa and we're going to play in the NBA Africa League, you know? So I think that definitely resonates with, you know, a lot of like my lived experience. And I'm sure with many people in this chat as well from different parts.
Yeah, that's exactly the point, because it goes back to what you said at the very beginning. Only 1% of our fans can ever come to our games. And that is true, right? And so how do you make people feel closer to the game? Of course, social media is great, but to your point, for us to play a game in Dakar, Senegal this weekend, and we had thousands of not just cheering, just flag waving, the energy was just incredible. If you just have to be able to touch and feel it yourself. And it's kind of, you go back to me, right? I was in Sacramento. I was at the game. I'm cheering for the Kings, who often, unfortunately, lost by a lot back then. But it's like I knew someone on the court. Like, those are the types of things that inspire you to get out there on your own and practice basketball, but not just to play basketball, to all the things that sports teaches us, right? If you're playing teamwork, overcoming adversity, all of those things. So that's what, it's just great the globalization of our sport is really inspirational that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I guess this is maybe a little bit of a follow-up question, but it sounds as though you've learned a lot of skills with regards to, I mean, to be able to bridge, you know, these differences in culture and upbringing and whatnot when you're expanding internationally. Surely there are some skills that you have to be able to develop in order to relate to people from anywhere. And I think this is something that people who choose to do Global Citizen Year also begin to experience, is, you know, you have to sort of find common ground with people in different ways. And so I'm curious to hear what your experience with that has been like, if you have any wisdom to impart to anyone who may be choosing to go on a Global Citizen Year sometime soon, or maybe even just take some time to move to a new country or whatever it may be. Yeah, I'd love to hear if you have any insight that you'd like to share for building those connections.
Yeah, I think, listen, the opportunity to be part of Global Citizen Year, and just especially people like you who are immersed, you were in Ecuador, right? It's invaluable experience, because you really can't understand how to, you know, whether in business or in community efforts, how to approach a new region unless you understand the region and you've lived it. And it's the same here in the US. You know, I work with all of our teams. When I go to Memphis, when I go to Oklahoma City, when I go to Minnesota, like, you can't advise those teams unless you really understand the communities and what they care about and what matters to them. And it's the same thing globally. And that's been a big learning for me. And I must admit, one of my biggest regrets, it's just I wasn't given the opportunity, is to do a lot globally when I was a teenager and in college. We did not have a very international curriculum. You know, I was a political science and communication major, but I did not have the opportunity to spend time globally. And I didn't until I was working for Sun Microsystems, and part of my job was a global product manager. So I was traveling to all these different countries. But that would be my advice, is how important it is, if you're going to have a global role, to understand the area and the people and what's important in the region that you're talking about. And so for us, we've learned the MBA, we can't just replicate we can't replicate, our NBA G League and just take it to Africa, right? Like we need an African centric and country, this well, like country by country approach as well.
Yeah.
And so that's been the big learning, and to have that humility to want to learn and to want to understand, and the intellectual curiosity coming in that you don't know everything, and to ask questions and listen. So just to have that approach as I wish I had these doors open to me, because I think that foundation of global understanding would really be invaluable in my late teens, early 20s, where I was just reading it in a book, right?
Yeah, that's
Not
really
even online, in an actual book.
No, that's really awesome to hear. I think there's definitely a lot all of us can take away from that, in the sense that, I mean, even me, after my global citizen year in Ecuador, I still find myself in, I'll go to a different city in New York, and a different city in the US outside of New York, and I'll immediately be like, oof, I'm out of my depth. I'm in Memphis now. How do I figure this out? So I think one thing I also take away from what you just told us is that it's a continuing process. It's not as though you go abroad once and you've learned all the skills for creating connections. You're constantly developing and building on them.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I think the next question is going to be it's an anonymous audience question, but basic, unless an anonymous person wants to ask it, I'll give like
anonymous people don't usually like to but you can offer.
You never know, they might feel a little inspired after you've given some insights. But basically this question is asking for if you could they're asking for an important life lesson that you've found in your journey. Maybe something that you discovered transitioning between industries, something you discovered or wisdom you'd like to impart that you've discovered now. Yeah, continue, however.
What I would say is, and I'm going back to that age in my life, right? 17 to 22 or so. I felt like I needed a structure by which to learn about the working world, because I learned a lot in academics about different subjects, but then I was thrown into a role. I didn't really know how to do this role. And a life lesson for me was really working in management consulting. I hate to give a full endorsement of another industry, but it was so important in my life, because at Bain, I spent 3 years at Bain after my MBA. And a big reason I wanted to go to Bain is when I was in business school, I felt like all of the people who were consultants had read a secret document that I didn't. Like they had been trained, is what I'm trying to say. And that there are some roles out of college that train really well. They train you how to frame a problem. They train you how to solve a problem. And most importantly, they train you how to tell a story. People respond to stories. What is the story behind why we should launch a league in Africa, right? I don't just start with like the number of NBA fans in Africa, right? That what is the story first? And so I felt like I wish I might have gone into that area straight from undergrad, because I felt like the learning and the structure, and I advise people all the time who want to get into sports, sometimes it's a better path to go to a different industry and learn a foundation of how to market things to consumers, how to solve different business problems. And I just felt that the training is getting the right training is so important at a younger age.
Awesome. I think that's definitely really helpful to hear. I think when I was fresh out of, I guess technically I'm still kind of fresh out of college, but I know immediately after graduation, I was kind of like, all right, what do I do next? What's the next step?
You don't know.
Yeah, there's no like rule book of which way you're meant to go. And I guess my last question, it's kind of similar, but I think, do you have any advice for, you know, someone who is, let's say, 18 years old right now and has this passion that, like, for, whether it's basketball, whether it's you know, women's policy, they have this passion. And do you have any advice for them in terms of how do you pursue this passion while also, you know, ensuring that you are, you know, in an industry that will help you pursue this passion, and in an industry that will help you, like, you know, develop in ways that you hope to see positive changes in the world, let's say?
Yeah, I guess my advice would be, I think it's really hard and you shouldn't put the pressure on yourself when you're 18, 20, 22 to know exactly what you want to do. So many
Mm.
people are like, what do you want to do? What's your passion? And like, you should outline, I want to be the chief innovation officer. Like that didn't come to me. You want to put yourself in positions to help you down the path towards where you think you want to be. And that was my state back then. I really liked basketball. And knowing what I know now, first of all, the working world is long. It is a long time. I've been I just had my 25th year college reunion. Like, I've been working 25 years. Like, if you're going to work 25 years, have a job that you actually enjoy going to, I think. So I think to have that, to follow that passion, at least chase it down. If you have a passion, at least chase down what roles, what are jobs in this area. I have people who come to me all the time. It's like, no one really understands. Like, what do you actually do? Like, they like the thought of, oh, I work for the NBA. That sounds really cool. Learn what people actually do. Not everything is glamorous. I told you about I could tell you all day. We could talk COVID fan protocols. This is not glamorous, but you just have to do some things. But I think that would be my advice to people: is if you think you really enjoy something, you enjoy music, you enjoy entertainment, you enjoy community service, just
Yeah.
learn about and talk to people. This program is fantastic for a network. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to talk to students just looking to learn. And so that's what I would say, you know, before you jump to an industry that you're not as passionate about, which is fine. And plenty of people have jobs that they aren't like, this is my passion. Just, I would say, to chase it down and understand what roles around your passion might look like. Or you may not have a passion, which is fine. Like, do something that just opens and exposes you to all different sorts of things, and you might gravitate towards something that you like.
Mm. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm gonna preface a question in the chat by saying, I think one thing that I've noticed you mentioned a couple number of times during our chat is the importance of having, you know, mentors and leaders around you. So I'm gonna invite Kendall to ask her question, because I think it's a really great question for developing those communities around you. So Kendall, go for it.
Thank you. Hi, Amy. Thanks for taking the time of being here. It's been amazing hearing you speak. Yeah, my question is just about if you could speak to any mentors you may have had and that may have, you know, had some sort of transformational experience for you, whether you were a college athlete at Stanford or just earlier in your career or even in the NBA.
Yeah, I have several, you know, starting with my parents. Very fortunate to have my dad teaching me how to work in the stores and how to simple business stuff, and pushing me in the importance of work. And my mom really, she was a teacher, kindergarten teacher, pushing me on the importance of learning and that curiosity. So I'm grateful for them. I go back to sports a lot. Some of my coaches, my high school basketball coach is someone who would write inspirational quotes to us before the game. She was really tough, but inspirational at the same time. Told me I would never make the high school varsity team unless I changed my shot going into my 9th grade. And I said, wait, my shot goes in. Why should I change my shot? You know, you have to trust your mentors sometime. And it's good. I shot from way down here. I would have got my shot blocked all the time. I never played at Stanford. But those type of people who push you yet inspire you along the way. And it is all about who you work for as well. My very first manager, my very first job out of college, pushed me hard. But he showed me things. He gave me a little 2x2 paper, drew a 2x2, and he said, here's how you manage your day. Put the most important 5 things you have to get done in the top left. Put the second most important 5 things in the top right. Put the stuff that you don't need to do today, but you got to get done sometime in the bottom left. And then in the bottom right, put down the people you need to call back. Like, oh, I didn't know that. Stanford didn't teach me how to manage my day. Okay, I learned how to manage my day. But it starts with little things like that, and it gets more sophisticated. And you just want to create this network of people that you can talk to them about. And it could be someone in your business world, but it could be, I gave you the example earlier of my friend, his name was Tom, right? My friend from business school, he's like, go back to New York and interview. Why would you do it on the phone? Like, get on the plane. You just need people who are just going to give it to you straight in your life that you can trust. I don't know a better way to say it than that. And it can be personal, it could be family, it could be friends, but you do need people. And even today, you know, I don't know everything. Like, I need to ask people. My husband helps me a lot, right? He's like my agent. I'm like, can you just, he's so helpful as a sounding board. So you just need to surround, and if you don't have a bunch of people like that, it's okay. When, like, you're 20, 22, 25, like, it's okay. You can gather those people. Thank you for your question, Kendall.
Thank you for that. That was very great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kendall. We're nearing the end. I have a couple more, like one or two more questions.
Yeah. I know you've got some NBA questions in there. You've got some NBA fan questions.
I'll save the NBA questions for the end. I think the one thing I would like to know is, you've spoken about the challenges that something like a global pandemic can cause. And I mean, we've all lived through it and we all know our own personal challenges. And I think there has been a common thread of sort of the, you know, it's been a long pandemic for a lot of us. And, you know, things can feel very bleak at different times. And so I'm curious, what things help you stay hopeful and inspired during the global pandemic? Because I know for a lot of people, you know, it's been a tough time. It's a time when people have struggled to find inspiration. People have struggled to find motivations to, you know, continue doing the work that they're doing because of the growing challenges. So yeah, I'd love to hear what things have sort of kept you going, because I think the NBA has, in my opinion, at least, been one of the best examples of a company that has, you know, rolled with the punches, and if anything, actually, like, you know, found ways to make things not just work, but if anything, even better given the circumstances. So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, and listen, and I started to talk about this. It was professionally very hard for all of us at the NBA during the pandemic. We were the first, we were the first entity to shut down for COVID. Rudy Gobert tested positive in a game. We shut down the whole league. Next thing you know, everything is shut down. And the hardest part then was, well, of course, personally, the hardest part is like what's going on in the world, but professionally, when can we start playing again? Mm-hmm. We have an indoor sport. We don't know. And so if you all recall, we had a bubble in Orlando where we finished the season that summer. Things go wrong in planning. I think this is a lesson. So we chose Orlando, which at the time we planned it 4 weeks out, was the lowest COVID rate in the country. Guess what it was when we actually started the bubble? It was the highest COVID rate in the country. Things happen, right? So, yeah. You know, we managed through it. We had, you know, a social justice focus, given world events, George Floyd incident, and others during this time. That was very important as well. And we realized we had a platform for that. And so all of that, very hard. But your question is, how do you find the inspiration, right? Because it's hard and it's challenging. I find the inspiration through hard work with the team, with teammates. You feel like you're in the trenches together in a lot of ways, and you're figuring out a way out of it. And these are people who I care a lot about, that I work with. That's one thing, is just the interpersonal nature of work and getting through problems together as a team. It's very similar to playing sports, right? You're down by 20. This is the fourth quarter. Like, what are you going to do? Like, you got to at least get together, give it your best shot, right? It's very similar to that. And on the personal side, just time with family. I tried to look at the bright side. I'm someone who has a busy job and traveling. I have two amazing kids that I was able, and husband who I was able to spend a lot more time with. And so if you're able to just take a step back and say, what's good about this situation, there's things that are good. And that was certainly one of them for me. And yeah, I caught up on my streaming movies and all that stuff too, books. So
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. Now, this is my last question is going to be hot, like quick NBA questions, because I know we only have 4 minutes left. And this is for any NBA fans in the chat, because I know this is very much a global citizen, your chat, but I'm an NBA fan. I must know I gotta ask these questions. So who's your pick for MVP, if you could choose one?
ooh, you can't tell yet. We've got longer in the season. I think that the next month is really going to be telltale. You can't
Okay,
tell.
you can give me your
Got
top
so
two.
many
You can
stories.
give me your top two.
You've got so many stories, right? You've got Giannis, you got Joel Embiid, you've got Steph, you got LeBron always. There's so many choices. I think it'll be determined in the next month or so.
Cool. And which two
Your
teams?
pick.
My pick? Oh, my pick is gonna be Giannis because I'm a fan. I'm biased personally. I'd love to see him, but I think if any of Giannis, Jokic, or Steph wins it, I'd be happy. That
is incredible. I mean, incredible.
Yeah, and he also put up 46 yesterday, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Last question before I sign off is, who do you think will be in the finals? If you had to choose two teams that you think will be in the finals.
You're asking me the hard questions.
Someone has to ask the hard-hitting question.
No, I got to flip this back on you, because the exciting things about the play-in tournament that we now have is there's hope. I mean, you're looking at our 9th seed in the standings, and like, you're going to want to play some of those teams in the play-in tournament. No. And we actually did an interesting survey of our fans in January and found 90% of it thought that their team was going to make the playoffs or the play-in. So that is creating that hope. It is incredible. I'm going to turn your question back on you. Who do you think?
Well, it's funny you say that about hope, because I've been struggling to understand why I'm always hopeful that the Boston Celtics, who I support, will get to the finals, but I still think the Boston Celtics will get to the finals this year. I believe it.
Incredible organization.
Yeah.
Boston Celtics.
I'd love to see the Celtics versus the Clippers personally, but I don't think that will happen. I do not think that will happen. But the Celtics versus the Lakers will also not happen, but that would be cool to see.
And if you haven't checked out a young guy named Ja Morant in Memphis,
oh my goodness,
you do that. It was our most consumed highlight ever on Instagram last week. 52 million people watched the highlight, and go pull it up, but it's a end of the first half highlight, cross court pass. He caught it in the air, twisting, made the shot. It's just incredible. So check that out. It's
crazy because it was right after he had done another play, which was like play of the game.
Multiple plays. But we have such exciting young players, and again, global players too, which makes it a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, that's my final question. Seeing a lot of emojis in the chat, which is awesome. I think I speak for everyone when I say, Amy, this was an amazing session. I had such a pleasure speaking to you, moderating this chat, introducing a couple other people into the chat as well. Are there any final words that you'd like to give us before you depart?
Well, thank you. Your questions were really insightful and thoughtful, and I'm just honored to be part of this program, because I think it's really special. I hope all of you recognize, you don't always recognize when things are special when you go through them, but what an incredible program to be a part of. And I would just encourage you to make the most of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. For everyone in the chat, we'd love it if you could just give us one last show of some emojis to show some appreciation for Amy. Throw your basketballs in the chat.
There you go.
Also, before everyone signs off, please take a look in the chat. There is a survey link for you all to fill out, please. In addition to filling out the survey, it's also a space for you to send your appreciation to Amy personally as well. So please definitely do fill out the survey in the chat. And finally, to sign off, you can feel free to unmute yourselves and say thank you and goodbye to Amy.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so
Thanks so much. Bye. Happy International Women's Day.
Yes, happy International Women's Day, everyone. Thank you for joining in your time.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Love this speech.